So, as often happens when I'm doing a puzzle, thoughts, happen because your brain isn't doing much of anything else. And as sometimes happens, my brain went to autism, because I have it. And I was thinking about those people that use their autism as an excuse to get away with saying or doing things that they know will get a rise out of people. I would argue that means that they may not necessarily have autism, but I'm not a doctor. Here are my thoughts on this. By the way, the same goes for the first part for people who have any mental illness and then use that as an excuse to get away with things that they know are not socially acceptable. Most of us, the majority of us, I would be bold enough to say, we don't want drama. We don't want a fight. We just want to live our lives because it is stressful enough just being human beings. Hence why you're watching me do a puzzle while I talk. Because, my hands aren't shaking nearly as much as I thought they were. Anyway, you may think it's harmless fun to mess with your friends, relatives, whoever, and get a rise out of them. But here's the problem with that. Every person that meets a new autistic person, or bipolar, or whatever the diagnosis is, even if they try to give you the benefit of the doubt, this new person, they'll have a background tension because they'll be expecting this new person to pull all the kinds of hijinks that you've been pulling. And when now this is autism specific, when they genuinely say something and it does not come out the way they intended, we may not even know how it was intended to be, but it's usually not the way it was interpreted. Well, I don't know if interpret is the right word. We don't always know how neurotypical people will hear what we're saying. We don't, and the filter doesn't exactly always work either. So, when the majority of us, genuinely say something that does not come out the way we intended, if we had stopped to think of how we intended it to sound, this person who's been dealing with the argumentative one, medication alarm, because they've been dealing with those antics, they will think that we meant to insult them, or whatever happened, they will think it was intentional. And let me just tell you, if this happens to you, if someone who has autism and you've been dealing with this other kind of person, if they say something and it does not come out correctly and you jump down their throat, here's what'll happen. We will mentally back away from the conversation, paralyzed, wondering what just happened, how to make the yelling stop, or frustration, or whatever. Because it's not that we're not good with the subtle emotions, but one thing we know well is the bad ones. Frustration can often, to us, read as anger. Even when we ourselves feel frustrated, we may think we're mad. I speak from experience. The only way that I knew that I was frustrated or embarrassed was because one of the programs I went through gave me an emotion diagnostic sheet, which for an autistic person is very, very handy. It breaks it into symptoms. And so I was able to figure out that no, I wasn't mad, I was embarrassed because I shared a thing in group and nobody responded to this big traumatic thing. Well, anyway, autism isn't necessarily that we don't feel. It's not that we don't feel. It's that, well, for me at least, I feel too much and then I shut down because I don't know what to do with all these things that I'm feeling. I'm just paralyzed in shock or fear or whatever. What just happened? I don't know. How do I make it stop so that I can analyze what just happened? So you've had this interaction, you got mad, and now the person that you were talking to has frozen down. They've gone into lockdown, basically, and they don't know what to do. And we will repeat ourselves quite often because our brains are hamsters running in a wheel, getting nowhere because we don't know what just happened and we don't know how to make it stop, and we are freaking out inside and probably outside as well. So, may I request that if you are one of these people that I've been talking about that purposely plays things up, like, pretends not to understand to get a reaction, overreacts just to get a reaction, whatever it is that you're doing, I'm not entirely sure that I understand the mentality or what's going on because I just don't get it. May I firmly request that you cease and desist, because I've had people tell me that I'm not autistic because they work with autistic people, or they'll say, well, you're not, this isn't the autism that's got you behaving this way because I work with autistic people, or I have a cousin who's autistic, or I have a brother, sister, son, whatever. We are all diverse. It is a spectrum. The way one of us reacts to something isn't necessarily the way that all of us would react to something. And the only way that I can talk about this is to have a thing to focus on while I'm talking. And that's another thing that people don't always understand. It's like, well, you're not listening to me. Yes, I'm actually listening better to what you're saying. But you're doing this other thing. Yeah. This other thing is keeping the nerves from overwhelming me because we're talking about this big, complicated thing. I need something else to look at aside from another human being. We're not good with eye contact. Just as a whole, we have to work at it and force ourselves to do it. I'm generalizing, but for the most part, we're not good at it. And by the way, telling us, look at me, in a very angry or frustrated tone is gonna have the opposite effect. I can guarantee 99% of the time, probably don't actually go by my statistics, but demanding that we make eye contact is gonna do the opposite. We don't understand why you're frustrated. We don't understand why you want us to look at you right this moment when you're obviously mad, and that is visual signaling in addition to the vocal signaling that you're mad. And that's another stimuli to add to all the other stimuli that's freaking us out in that moment. And if we do manage to make eye contact, then that's just too much and almost guaranteed shutdown or meltdown, maybe both. And my last thought is that if this happens and the person is genuinely confused and they don't know what they did, I'm willing to bet almost all of us will, when we're not overwhelmed, when we've been given a chance to calm down, we do need to decompress after these sorts of things. Because otherwise our brains will just run in circles like a hamster wheel and annoy the bleep out of you, make you more frustrated, and the whole conversation will just derail. But most of us, if you give us a chance to look out a window, practice our breathing exercises, whatever coping skill we've been given, let us do that. And then, when we have reached a stable place again, a large percentage of us will be willing to work with you. Like, okay, what just happened? How do I make that not happen again? Because that was scary, I didn't like it, and please let's not. What did I do? How can I fix it? So, and this is the thing. The people that are just pissing people off to piss them off are doing the rest of us a disservice, because what we need the most is patience and understanding. We need people to say, okay, I'll let you calm down, then we can discuss, we can what's it called? Debrief. We can debrief. But when you purposely antagonize people, they are less willing to make the effort to figure out what happened, where the breakdown happened, and work through it. They will most of them will be more likely to just write off either the person with autism that they're interacting with, or, worst case scenario, all autistic people. So you might think you're just affecting your circle of friends and or family, but you're not. You're affecting the narrative of an entire community of people who are just trying to exist in a world that is inherently overwhelming. There's stimuli being thrown at us every time we go out. You go to the hospital, they have the news playing on the TV. I don't know why. You're going to be more stressed out with the news playing, and you're supposed to be in a place of healing, but whatever. There's the news at the doctor's office. There's, people not using headphones, and their music is blaring. There are smells that are assaulting our noses if they happen to be someone who's hypersensitive to smell. For someone who's sensitive to all 5 senses, leaving the house is not the kind of adventure I would have wanted as a child. So, the golden rule could not apply any more strongly here. Because we need people to treat others as they want to be treated, and maybe also a little, I don't know, I had the thought, and it's not forming, but not, see, I'm a writer, but dialogue is hard, okay? And I don't have the ability to edit this, so unfortunately, all of this rambling is just going to go up verbatim. And all of the ums. So, we need people to be willing to be patient with us, but if you're making it so that they don't have a good frame of reference, then they won't want to. I don't know. The thought is there, it's just not coalescing, which is a lot of the problem, is that we'll say something that kind of sort of sounds like what we meant to say because it's all we can come up with, And sometimes that's when the misunderstanding happens. Because we say the thing that's kind of close. It's like speaking another language. Like, well, I don't know the word for this, but this is kind of close. So we need people that are willing to stop and learn the language. But when you purposely use the wrong, I don't know. The puzzle doesn't make words happen. It just reduces anxiety. So I'm gonna end the video here. I don't know who this will help, but I have had experiences, both good and bad. The biggest thing we need is patience. I cannot stress that enough. Patience. Ask us. Here's the thing you can do. Phrase what we said the way you heard it. You might have to do this a couple of times. I'm sorry. Sometimes we still don't get it. But rephrase it the way it sounded to you. Might have to use analogies or metaphors. Sometimes that's just the language we speak. But you'll be able to tell when it clicks because we don't read faces very well, but we are very easy to read most of the time. When it clicks, well, I mean, aside from, okay, we do have kind of, we're both open books and hard to read open books, but you'll probably be able to tell when it clicks when we figure out what you thought we said. Because chances are we'll say, whoa, hey, no, that was not what I meant to say. Or we might say, well, I mean, that's kind of close to what I was trying to say, but not that way. No, that's not what I meant. Well, if you watch Bones, I know it's a point of contention. I said if you watch Bones, because the TV show character, not the book character, is based off of someone who has autism. And even though she is not canonically someone with Asperger's, I do find that some of the ways that she phrases things to be helpful. One of the things that she said in the show, not the book, is that she said something along the lines of, that's what I said, but the way you said it makes it sound like horrible. Really, really paraphrasing. But, you know, when he rephrased what she said, she realized how it sounded. So that's kind of what you need to do, is just kind of figure out a way to show us your side. And speaking of showing someone the other side, here's another thing that confuses people. I don't know if it's all autistic people or if it's just me, but I do this thing and people find it to be arrogant, I guess. The only way that I do this, so the way that I show that I understood a thing that you just said is to say it back to you in a personal context. Like, oh, I had a similar thing happen to me. Because if I say the thing back to you and my anecdote is wildly different from what you just said, that means I didn't understand what you just said, and we can work from there. But a lot of people just think that I'm arrogant, which is no. Could not be further from the truth. I have absolutely no self-esteem at all. So, yeah. Try to look below the surface. Try to figure out what's genuine and what's not, just like you would with any other human being, any other human being. You always have to, look below the surface and figure out what's real, what's not, what's just a mask. We aren't as different as people think. We just, one guy that I follow says, we're basically Macs trying to operate in a PC world, to paraphrase. We're just working on a different operating system. Just, maybe try to be bilingual.